Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Madison, and I'll be the technical manager for this session today on collecting dietary data using a 5-minute survey module adapted for 100 countries, chaired by Anna Herforth. So thank you all so much for taking part in ANH 2022. We're looking forward to a really robust and interactive session today. So a quick reminder that everything you might need to access the conference materials and program can be found at the ANH Academy website at anh-academy.org/ANH2022. So before the DQQ team takes the conversation forward, I just have a few technical announcements to ensure our experience is as smooth and interactive as possible. So first, this session will be recorded and posted on the ANH Academy website following the conference. Second, all participants have been muted, but please introduce yourself using the chat function. Let us know your name, where you're joining us from, and the organization that you work with. We encourage you to share your webcam feed during the session, but if your internet connection is bad, we recommend turning your video off. And later in the session, there'll be opportunities for Q&A, but if you have any questions throughout the session, please do enter them in the chat box. And lastly, if you experience any technical issues, please check your audio and internet connection, and you can always reconnect to the session using the same Zoom link you used to join the session now. But if you have any other technical questions, please send me a private message using the chat box. So thank you all so much again for joining, and I'm gonna hand it over to Gina now.
Thank you, Julia. And welcome everybody to this session on using the Diet Quality Questionnaire, or DQQ. So sometimes you'll hear us say the whole thing, Diet Quality Questionnaire, and sometimes you'll hear DQQ. It's all the same thing. We are really excited to share this new questionnaire tool with you and get your, get you introduced to it and get you working with it hands-on, and also get your impressions of how it might be useful for you and your work and your colleagues. So as Julia asked, please, as we get started, introduce yourself into the chat and include the country where you're currently working. And if you'd like, you can also just let us know what you're hoping to learn today, what your expectations are for joining the Learning Lab. So just to get us kicked off, let me introduce myself. My name is Gina Kennedy, and I'm a senior specialist with GAIN, the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. And you're going to be joined today in the Learning Lab by Anna Herforth, Betul Uyar, Elise Talsma, Inga Brouwer, Cecilia Gonzalez, Christina Sokorenko, and Chris Voliano. This is going to be a 2-hour session, and you'll learn about the development of the Diet Quality Questionnaire, or DQQ. You'll participate in some really fun and interactive hands-on activities to better understand how the Diet Quality Questionnaire was developed, and also learn how you can administer it very easily in your context. And finally, you'll learn about how to calculate some indicators that can be really easily derived from the Diet Quality Questionnaire. So it's going to be a mixture of PowerPoints in terms of explanations, and also several breakout, small breakout activities that are designed to increase your familiarity with how to use the DQQ.
Thanks, Gina. So good to see everyone's faces. Hello, hello. Yeah, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. And really glad to have you all here. Just to warm up, we're going to do a super quick activity. We're going to use a tool called Mentimeter. If you are familiar with it, you can use your phone or your computer. But before we dive into it, maybe just let us know in the chat, have you used any dietary assessment tools before? Anything like 24-hour recall? What's your experience? Have you used any similar surveys before? And give us a snippet of that. And I'll go ahead and flash the activity and send the details in the chat as well. So take your time to join. You can use your phone and just flash the QR code, or you can use the link that I put in the chat. But we'll run a quick activity here to go through a couple questions, some of which you might see on a DQQ. The DQQ is a low burden dietary assessment tool that has cognitive validity. We wanted to kind of side by side the type of questions that the diet quality questionnaire uses, questions that lean on Sentinel foods, so common foods in a country that accurately represent a food group, versus some other type of questions like open recall, and just kind of see what we get. Do we get different answers? Do we get the same ones? Let's try it out together. So if everyone's had a chance to join, we can get started. And if you haven't, you can always just tap that link in the chat. So let's start with the first question then. Okay. And I realized that I actually forgot to do something. I was supposed to read an introduction, and this is a good lesson for me because I'm on the adaptation team, but I'm not an enumerator. So I'll go ahead and do that right now, even as you've answered the first question. Let's go for it. I'd like to ask you some yes or no questions about foods and drinks that you consumed yesterday during the day or night, whether you had it at home or somewhere else. First, I'd like you to think about yesterday. From the time you woke up through the night, think to yourself about the first thing you ate or drank after you woke up in the morning. Think about where you were when you had any food or drink in the middle of the day, and think about where you were when you had any evening meal and any food or drink you may have had in the evening or late night, and any other snacks or drinks you may have had between meals throughout the day or night. I'm interested in whether you had the food items I'll mention, even if they were combined with other foods. So please listen to the list of foods and drinks, and if you ate or drank any of them, please say yes. So I'll go ahead and read this first question, which it seems most of you have gotten to. You beat me to the chase. So yesterday, did you have any rice, ugali or fufu, bread, pasta, or porridge? It seems that most of you are on the yes train. So almost everyone has had a starchy staple, assuming they're able to use the poll successfully. And let's move to the next question here. Yesterday, did you have any sodas like Coke, Fanta, Sprite, or Red Bull? So most of you have not. I guess we're dealing with a crowd of people who work in food systems in some capacity. So not too surprised by that, but you can see that, questions like this can be used to take a pulse on sugar sweetened beverage consumption in a population. And this is a type of question that is present in the diet quality questionnaire, and it does exactly that. Let's move on to a different kind of question. Yesterday, did you have any fruits that are dark yellow or orange inside, like ripe mango or ripe papaya? I see some of you typing in the chat. That's fine too. Yeah. So it looks like many of you have identify with this question. Let's see what you meant by that. If you said yes to this question, let us know what fruits you had yesterday. I see nectarine, mango, papaya, tangerine, apricot, orange, Indian peach. Oh, interesting. Clementine, more peach, mangosteen. Yeah, fantastic. And with this in mind, let's actually try a different kind of question on the same topic. So yesterday, did you have any mango, ripe papaya, apricots, or dried apricots? So the lesson from this kind of question, I think you understood. The first question was kind of an open question asking, did you have any fruits that are dark yellow or orange inside, citing a few examples like mango and papaya. What happens with open-ended questions like this is that they unintentionally capture items that should actually be excluded. So I saw orange and clementine in the word cloud that we just built together. And that's fascinating. That's good data for us, because it shows that when you cite colors and leave the question open-ended, you might rope in foods that don't belong in this question. So this is a question on vitamin A rich fruits. And that's why the diet quality questionnaire type question that you see here uses Sentinel foods and a close-ended question to make sure that none of those errors happen. So let's move ahead and keep trying. So here I'll read to you the following question. Yesterday, did you have any milk or milk products such as milk, sour milk, skim milk, yogurt, cheese, powdered milk, condensed milk, evaporated milk, goat milk, camel milk, but not including butter, ice cream, cream, or sour cream? So most of you are saying yes to that very long question that I just read out loud. If you can even remember all the foods that I listed and all the foods that I asked you to exclude. Some of you said no, and one of you doesn't know, which is fair. Let's try another version. Yesterday, did you have any cheese? It seems most of you did not. Okay. Yesterday, did you have any yogurt or fermented milk? See, some people in the chat are saying no, yes. Great, thanks for that. And then one more here. Yesterday, did you have any milk or powdered milk? So feel free to type in the chat which question formulation was easier for you to answer. Was it the first one where I listed all the foods and excluded a couple? Or was it the past three where I just gave you one or two items? Oh, I see an interesting comment about, raises a question for me as to whether vegan dairy products count. Good question. I see Tay said the third one, which listed one or two items. So the lesson from these questions, which were questions on dairy, is that long questions like the one I read out loud to you at first, they're really difficult for people to absorb. It's difficult for someone to remember a list of things once it goes past 7 or 8 items. You tend to only remember maybe the first thing, maybe the last thing, and ending a question with a negative. So you might remember at the end, I said, well, but not including butter, ice cream, cream, or sour cream. That can be cognitively challenging. Not everyone hears the but not part. So they may actually think that the list includes those items. Having 3 streamlined items for dairy, which we see in the diet quality questionnaire, one for cheese, one for yogurt foods, and one for milk, actually helps participants understand quickly and efficiently what they may have had in the past day.
If I could jump in really quickly on some of the questions in the chat about the vegan dairy products, or do we mean dairy milk? I wanted to comment that these questions you're seeing here are kind of generic, as we'll discuss much more in detail in practice actually today. Part of the work of developing the DQQ is to adapt each question for a specific context, for a country context. And so what you're seeing here is not any particular country. It's just kind of a generic question for the purpose of practicing and how you can see how the questions look. But for a specific country, we would think carefully about these questions around, say, the vegan dairy product. So in most countries in the world, if you ask this question about milk, very few people, probably less than 1% of the population, would have had a vegan milk or would think of that. However, there might be certain countries where it's much more common. So actually in the United States, I think we added the word dairy to this question, so dairy milk, so that it would be clear to people that we do mean dairy and not plant milks, because it's quite common in this setting for people to drink plant milks, where in other settings it's not common and people wouldn't even think of it. So we'll talk more about the adaptation, but great questions coming up. Keep them coming in the chat.
Yeah, great. And let's go for one more category before we wrap up and move on to learn more about the methods and the entire concept behind the diet quality questionnaire. Yesterday, did you have any dark green leafy vegetables, such as spinach, cassava leaves, or any other leafy vegetables? Yeah, you were quick to jump on that one. So lots of people are saying yes. Not surprised with this group. And some are saying no. So while we think about that, tell us what what dark green leafy vegetables you had. If you said yes to the question just before, what were you thinking of? Which ones did you have yesterday? Spinach, cilantro, dark spring greens, cauliflower leaves. Ooh, that's a good one. I love cauliflower leaves, actually. Lettuce, kale, rocket, mustard, greens, chard, Swiss chard. And then let's try it a different way. Yesterday, did you have any spinach, kale, chard, broccoli, pumpkin leaves, amaranth leaves, or cassava leaves? So now the tables have turned a little bit. Most of you, it seems, are saying no, you haven't had any of these. We had a majority saying yes before when we started the question in an open-ended way. So an interesting lesson, and I'm really glad that we had all these great examples in the word cloud. A lesson from this is that open-ended questions may actually result in misclassification. So when we say, have you had any dark green leafy vegetables, such as spinach, cassava leaves, or other leafy vegetables, we open the door to all sorts of things. I saw cilantro, I saw herbs, I saw lettuce. Many of you wrote these for the examples, and these are actually not intended to be covered here for different reasons, either because it's not rich in vitamin A, it's not considered a dark green leafy vegetable, or because it's not consumed in significant amounts. So herbs are a really great example there. Yes, they are dark, they are green, they are leafy, but oftentimes they're used as garnish, not actually consumed in large amounts. Another lesson here is that Sentinel food questions, like the one you see here, they may actually remind people of items they might have forgotten. So broccoli is a good one here. Broccoli is, yeah, an item not everyone thinks of as a dark green leafy veg, but helps you remember that. And then the last lesson here is that the questions really have to be adapted to include relevant examples for each country. This short list of dark green leafy veg, it doesn't include many common vegetables in many countries. So with that said, let's see if there were, if you said yes, which of the dark green leafy vegetables did you have in the last question? And if you said no, maybe you had a dark green leafy veg not in the question. Feel free to share as well before we. Yeah, I see Myra says, yes, your list does not specify all the leafy vegetables in some countries. Very true. And that's why we adapt them for every country. And Anna will tell you a bit more about that in a moment. And I see Deola BC says, yes, amaranth leaves. Yeah, I didn't know you could eat fern either. And what is Kang Kong? Feel free to speak up. We'll have to Google that one. That's really neat. Radish leaves, mustard greens.
Kang Kong came up in lots of Southeast Asian countries, but Christina, you were not covering that region. So it didn't come up in the countries that you adapted.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Oh, no, I know. Yeah. Well, okay. Thank you everyone for running this exercise. It was really, really useful to kind of see how you responded to the different forms of questions, to the open-ended questions where we said any type of foods such as, and then to the close-ended Sentinel food questions, which is what the diet quality questionnaire relies on. And so I'll go ahead and close the activity, but keep the feedback coming. This is really, really insightful. And I'll pass the mic to Anna. Take it away.
Thanks, Christina. So now you've had a little practice, hands-on, thinking about how to recall the day yesterday and what you ate or drank, and a little practice with different formulations of questions asking you to recall that. So I want to talk more about that in introducing the diet quality questionnaire, which has been developed by the Global Diet Quality Project as a ready-to-use, easy tool for measuring diets. And the motivation behind this is it came from, in large part, thinking about how to capture the linkages between agriculture and nutrition. Because when we think about these many linkages between interventions, programs, or policies that can take place and the outcomes that they might affect, including the types of food that are available in markets, on farms, different social impacts and knowledge impacts, we then want to know what happens in terms of those when those outcomes occur, what are the impacts on food access, food consumption, and ultimately nutrition. And it has been fairly difficult to measure this, especially in agriculture programs where program managers are not necessarily nutritionists, cannot do a 24-hour recall, may have difficulty categorizing foods into the food groups nutritionists use. Even in using the MDDW, which is a fairly low burden, straightforward tool, it still presents challenges in terms of food classification and probing to understand, how to elicit information from people in a consistent way that really requires a lot of training and expertise. So our aim here was to democratize diet data collection so that it could be done by non-nutritionists and in a rapid, low burden way to come out with indicators of diet quality that can be useful for populations and be useful in understanding how to plan or look at impact potentially from agriculture programs at scale. And so this kind of looks at one of the most common pathways between agriculture and nutrition affecting access to nutritious food to meet dietary needs, which then affects diet quality, which then has an impact ultimately on nutritional status, and trying to create tools that allow insights into this impact pathway and improve knowledge around designing agriculture interventions and food systems that improve nutrition. So some of you might have come to the Food Prices for Nutrition Learning Lab earlier this week. If not, it's available. I think ANH Academy is making these available to view after. The focus of that project is indicators of food access. And then the project we're discussing today, Global Diet Quality Project, is trying to enable measurement of diet quality. So this project is a collaboration primarily between Harvard and Gallup and Gain and many other partners as well who have supported the project and collaborated. And the aim of the project is to enable diet quality monitoring through the collection of data using a standardized tool, the DQQ, that produces a suite of diet quality indicators comparable across time and geographies. So, the use of a standardized tool, a standardized suite of indicators, and it also, this project has the aim of actually collecting and having data across countries, which is also something that's been missing. You will have a chance to practice with this today. This is what the DQQ looks like. It's used for rapidly assessing diet quality at population level. It's not an individual clinical assessment tool because it's based on only 1 day of recall. Probably if you think about what you ate yesterday, you would think to yourself that it's not typical, which is what almost everyone thinks about their day that happened to be yesterday. We often have a lot of variation in what we eat from day to day. So it's not really meant for an individual dietary assessment per se, but when using it to look across the population at patterns across the whole population, it gives a very good signal of the diet quality, the dietary patterns and the diet quality in that population. So it consists of yes or no questions about foods consumed in the previous day. There are 29 food groups included in the questionnaire, which are universally included for all the different country adaptations, but the items are adapted to each country. So this tool takes about 5 minutes to administer. It's read aloud the same way each time, in person or by phone. So making it very easy and quick to implement. These are the food groups that are covered. We have an array of plant foods, a variety of different types of fruits and vegetables. We separate whole grains out from other foods made from grains to understand, various aspects related to health. We have a number of animal sourced foods categories as well. and then a number of food groups that are foods to limit in the diet that tend to be associated with non-communicable disease risk. And so the reason that those food groups were selected were actually around the types of information that we want to get from the DQQ. 3 of the kind of guiding guideposts for selecting the food groups and designing the questions were publications by the UN institutions around diet quality. So the tool is designed to gather valid and comparable data for the MDDW, following the guidance in the FAO MDDW guide. Also to produce indicators of whether the WHO healthy diet recommendations are met, and to be aligned with the WHO and UNICEF IYCF indicators. And the purpose there is to enable having diet data across the life course. So to date, most of the diet data that's been collected through DHS across countries has been for infants and young children and not the general population. So we want to facilitate the collection of diet data in the general population with the DQQ and align it with what's being collected in infants and young children. So we actually have produced two different DQQs. There's the main one, which we'll be practicing with today for the general population, which is for everybody, women and men, and of all ages. So not just women of reproductive age as the MDDW indicator, including women of reproductive age, but also everyone else in the general population. And then there's a companion country adapted IYCF questionnaire using the same food groups, but additional questions and additional adaptations that are specific to the 6 to 23 month age range. So these produce a number of indicators, as you can see at the bottom. And these indicators include, but go beyond the MDDW. So this is an indicator, the minimum dietary diversity for women, probably most people are familiar with. It's been very highly used, but that only covers one aspect really of diet quality for a specific population, which is women of reproductive age. And it's meant to proxy for nutrient adequacy, but we also care about other aspects of the diet. And we also are interested in how does dietary consumption among women of reproductive age compare to other population groups? How does it compare to dietary intake among men, which would probably better be useful for assessing gender disparities than only having data on women. So we broaden the questionnaire and the view of what diet quality includes to what is really well aligned with the general understanding on diet quality, which includes adequacy, but it also includes protection of health against non-communicable disease. And we also care about sort of nutrition transition and ultra-processed food intakes, which themselves have to do with both aspects of adequacy, displacing nutrient-rich foods, as well as being risk factors for NCDs, diet-related NCDs. So the diet quality questionnaire captures these different aspects of nutrient adequacy, consumption of food groups aligned with dietary guidelines, risk factors for non-communicable disease, which are mainly the ones listed there in the box identified by WHO, as well as being able to track nutrition transition trends and ultra-processed foods. And in the future, we hope also being useful for some indication of the sustainability of diets, which is one of the reasons we broke down the animal source foods into so many subcategories. For example, separating ruminant meat from non-ruminant meat so that we could have the potential for looking at, for example, the greenhouse gas emissions associated with diet patterns. And then looking just towards the bigger picture on the whole project, it's very exciting that the DQQ has been implemented now in the Gallup World Poll so far in 40 countries, and will be up to 55 countries next year. And you can see these as shown in the map here. So data is actually coming soon, nationally representative data using the DQQ across all of these countries. And in addition, DHS is using the majority of DQQ question adaptations to collect data among women and infants and young children, which are the age groups that are covered in DHS in low and middle income countries. So there has been a paucity of diet quality data across countries. Right now, if you wanted to go and look up, what's the MDDW in pick a country in Angola, it's not easy to find that information. Or if you wanted to know anything about soft drink consumption in India or in the United States, you'd have to kind of dig for that. There's not really a central repository. So we hope to create this place where you can find comparable data across countries and use that to understand diet patterns, across countries. And this is the first effort really to monitor diet quality across countries. That we've had lots of efforts to gather existing diet quality data. One shown here that's a very worthwhile, excellent effort, the GIFT platform of FAO and WHO to compile existing data sets that exist, that are out there in different countries. Lots and lots of data sets are available. But when you want to find recent nationally representative surveys, there are not very many of them that are available. So right now they're continuously adding, but right now this is the situation of if you want to look for nationally representative data, currently there's only data from 8 countries and 3 are from within the last 10 years. So this is going to be updated further, but there just is not nationally representative data across many countries. And it's something that has been, I think, a real gap in nutrition, the field of nutrition, understanding just what people eat and how it's changing, and also in trying to connect the dots between agriculture and nutrition. So really trying to fill this gap with a feasible monitoring tool that can be scaled up. A little bit about the validation and adaptation of the DQQ. It started with cognitive validation, cognitive testing, to understand how people think about the questions when they hear them. So this is similar to what we just practiced using the Mentimeter exercise, but we have some traditional ways of asking these questions that had been published in previous MDDW guides that were really suggestions that had not been validated or tested. And we sought to really dig into what is the best way to ask questions about food group consumption that are consistently understood by everyone in the same way each time. And what we found is when we asked these open-ended questions, which had been the suggestions previously, and a lot of people use when they're using a list-based method, what we found is exactly what we saw here, that sometimes respondents sometimes they don't think of items that belong. They might have different abilities to think about other things that belong in the same group. And also people group foods differently. So what some people consider a dark green leafy vegetable may be different from what other people do. People might not just be listening to the whole question. We asked about dark orange or dark yellow or orange fruits in the other example, and we got some fruits that are not orange at all. And that's because it's hard to listen to every piece of the question and integrate it into remembering at the same time what you might have had that might fit that description. And so, especially in multi-topic surveys where people are getting lots and lots of questions, very hard to pay attention to every word. We want to make it as simple as possible and just ask about concrete, specific items that people do understand in the same way. And so what we found is that if we instead took an approach of using a maximum of about 6 or 7 items per question, that people could recall those and more accurately report or more consistently report consuming the foods that were listed. So, then after this cognitive testing, the next question was, okay, what if we just use these closed-ended questions of most commonly consumed items? Will that serve the purpose, or will we be missing a lot? And the idea here of using most commonly consumed items, which we also call Sentinel foods, is that a lot of times the majority of people consuming the food group are consuming a pretty small list of items. So for an example, in the US, if we want to understand consumption of starchy roots and tubers, all we need to do is ask if people had potato. It's clearly not the only starchy root or tuber available in the United States. There are many others available, but it's so common that it captures almost everyone who had anything in that category. And because this is really designed for monitoring at population level, that's okay. We don't need to capture every food that might possibly have been consumed, because many of there's a long list of items that could be consumed, but they're just at the tail with less than 1% consuming each of those items, where there's some really big ticket common items that will capture almost everybody. So this seems to be an approach that would work, and we're in the middle of doing a validation study. It's not out in the published literature yet, but quite encouraging that choosing Sentinel foods in each country does represent the majority of people who consume each food group. One of the papers from this study that has been published recently is from China, where we actually were more concerned than in many other countries, because it's such a big, diverse country that it seemed it might be difficult to choose a short list of foods that would actually capture most people. But in fact, it does work. And you see in the red line, the proportion of the population at national level that is captured by the items in each DQQ question. And we have determined this by analyzing almost nationally representative dietary intake data to see like 24-hour recall data of what people actually ate. And we do find that nationally, each question captures more than 95% of people who consumed the food group in each different food group. At province level, also, the results are quite good. So the DQQ can be used at subnational level. Some of the food groups are slightly below our standard of capturing at least 90%. But even so, the conclusions around diet quality remain largely the same, where, for example, group 21, which is nuts and seeds, in this particular province, only 80% of people were captured because there was an item that's common in that province that's not in the DQQ. However, it still is only about, the actual data is about 6% of people had a nut or seed if all items are included. And if only the DQQ items are included, our conclusion is that 5% of people had nuts or seeds. So it's still, keeping in mind, we're not trying to capture every last thing, but get an indication around the population consumption of these food groups, and it does work for that purpose. We also have done a validation study in 3 countries. This is part of Betul's PhD work. She's not here today, but she's doing her PhD at Wageningen and leading the study. And Chris Williano's PhD work also fed into this from Solomon Islands. And we have implemented the DQQ followed by a detailed 24-hour recall to compare how people report food group consumption. And bottom line here is we found very close correlation between what people report in the 24-hour recalls versus the DQQ. So confirming that the DQQ is a valid tool for representing food group consumption in these 3 very different contexts. A little bit about adaptation. So the conclusion to use a short list of Sentinel food items leaves the very tall ask of adapting each DQQ for each country. And so we have undertaken this effort for so far 105 countries and counting, to adapt the DQQ to the specific food items that are common in each place. This has been a really big global effort. And I'll give you some stats on that in a moment. But we have a standardized process for this adaptation, which is aligned with the first the MDDW guide, the way foods are grouped, aligned with the IYCF indicators again. And the key purpose of the adaptation process is to identify country-specific Sentinel food items. We also probe about items consumed in amounts less than 15 grams, since that is something that makes the MDDW more valid to exclude items consumed in small amounts. And so we ask our key informants about, things that are possible to consume in small amounts, whether they should be excluded. So for example, sesame seeds often come up as in some countries they're consumed in large amounts and should be included. If they're put together in a ball and consumed as a snack, it's a large volume of sesame seeds. But in many countries, they're kind of a condiment and used as a sprinkle. So that we probe into which items in which country should be excluded using kind of a standard approach across countries. And we also look for common names of items. And so we really want to make sure that the respondents understand the question the same way and understand the food items that we're asking about. So common names in a lot of settings become very important. The process starts with a desk review of existing questionnaires that have been used. For example, if MDDW has been collected starting from existing adaptations and producing kind of what we call a zero draft, and then doing key informant interviews with a variety of people from different areas of each country to ask about common items using the standardized process. And finally, looking at the results and harmonizing across countries to make sure we have not inadvertently missed items in some countries that are actually common in the region. And these interviews, they're in a way embedding cognitive testing in each adaptation. So we'll come up with a draft question and ask if it works. So we'll ask our key informants, for example, if I said, yesterday, did you have noodles and you had pasta, would you say yes? Or if you would say no, then we should add pasta to the list of items if people don't consider them a type of noodle. So trying to get the words that will capture what people understand. Asking things like, sort of pretending as if we are an alien who does not understand food at all. Just ask, what is cheese? Tell me what cheese is. And sometimes we get interesting results that are very different from our own cultural understanding of the item. So for example, for that one in Cambodia, it's actually a fish product and not a dairy product. And so without understanding how people hear the word and what it means, we would get the wrong information. So really probing into what people understand. Finally, an example of the way we did harmonization, we actually mapped out most of the foods that came up to ensure we were not missing things. This shows how we were looking at different dark green leafy vegetable species in the Central African region. That's why it's the only region highlighted. Found that in the Central African region, amaranth came up everywhere. So that was covered. This other species, which is called different names in different places, it's excluded in 2 of the countries, and we wanted to make sure that we had a reason for that. We had asked about it. No, it's not common. It should be excluded so that we didn't miss it by accident. So all in all, this added up to a really large, global, inclusive and participatory effort, which included over 750 people around the world as key informants in collaboration with a lot of the UN institutions, DHS, our funders, the Sun Secretariat, and in all added up to over 300 days of person time effort to adapt and harmonize these food lists so that everyone doesn't have to do it for themselves. It's all the food categorization, these tricky decisions about what's included as a small, excluded as consumed in a small amount, things like that, are harmonized and are made in consistent ways so that it's ready to use. A huge thanks to the incredible dream team, the adaptation team. Most of the adapters are here participating today, but just tons and tons of effort to do all of these interviews by Zoom, Skype, whatever could reach people where they were, to make sure everyone's voice was heard in the key informant interview process, and build these tools. You can see lots more about the tools and actually download them, which we'll demonstrate later, and more about the project here at the project website, which is dietquality.org. And big thanks to all of the donors and supporters who helped make this possible. And in particular, these two grants on the topic of adaptation from USAID and the EU and BMZ through GIZ on specifically adapting the DQQ for countries to produce these ready-to-use tools. So we're next going to go into an activity to actually try out some adaptation work and experience that process. As you do that work, you might want to keep some of the considerations in mind that we thought through each time we did cognitive testing and key informant interviews. So first and foremost, the idea is to capture the most commonly consumed foods, aiming to capture 90% or more of people who ate anything in the food group, not aiming to capture 100%. So keeping in mind, we're trying to get the big picture on commonly consumed foods. How is the food eaten affects how we ask about it. For example, we don't ask people if they had flour, because nobody eats flour. They eat things made from flour like bread, or maize may be actually mostly consumed as tortilla. So using the words of foods that are actually consumed. How is the food called by most people? For example, in Kenya, kale is very, very common, but we wouldn't ask, did you eat kale? Because most people call it sukuma wiki. So we would ask, did you eat sukuma wiki? Thinking through, does everyone understand that name for the food, or do we also need other names? In Nepal, there are 3 different names for eggplant, and all of them are needed in terms of what we heard from our key informants. If we left out any one of these words for eggplant, we would miss people who actually eat it. Same like in the United States, some people call it pop, some people call it soda. So we include both of those. Also keeping in mind if that word means anything else inadvertently. In Nigeria, if we just said the word wara, it could recall things that are either in the legume category or the cheese category, or both. So we have to specify there what we're talking about, soy wara or wara from milk. And another example from Indonesia of a word that could mean 2 different food groups. And does the word include anything it should not include? So in the citrus category, we want fruits that are eaten whole, eaten like a large quantity, over 15 grams. We do not want lemon and lime because they're usually used as condiments or flavorings. So we had to find a different way of asking other than to say the word jeruk in Indonesia, which captures all citrus, including lime. We had to figure out a different way to ask that to avoid capturing things that should be included. So lots of considerations. You can keep those in mind while doing the activity, and I will pass it over to Cecilia to introduce the activity.
Thank you, Ana. My name is Cecilia Gonzalez, and I'm going to lead us to the group exercise to do a little practice of a DQQ country adaptation. So in the next slide, you'll see today in small groups, we're going to explore the most commonly consumed foods in one country for 2 food groups. The food groups will be legumes and processed meats. And so I'll briefly just go into the instructions for it. The step 1 is to go into your small group and of course, introduce yourself, share your name, affiliation and country. And then once you have done introductions, you can select a country. We're going to put the link in the chat for the DQQ map the country map where the DQQ has been adapted. And so if there is someone in your group that you want to choose to be the country rep that understands what foods are consumed there, choose one of those, but just make sure it's from the DQQ country map. If no one is from one of those countries, I'm sure that within your group you'll have someone who has some good understanding of what people consume either by working there or having lived there. So also we want you to select 2 roles, particularly, like I mentioned, the person who will be your informant about what foods are more commonly consumed, someone to take notes of what is being said in those, and then the rest of the group can ask these questions, trying to understand the list. And then step 4, the food groups again are legumes. And so for the legumes, these will include things like beans, peas, lentils, chickpeas, soy, and also if needed, it can include certain products like hummus or tofu. And then the second group, processed meats, includes things like cured or smoked meats, for example, sausage, bacon, or hot dog. And it also would include dried or canned meat. And so before we go into small groups, I'm going to do a little bit of a mock interview for a few seconds with my colleague Chris, who is knowledgeable of the Colombian context. So Chris, are you there?
Yes. Hey, Cecilia.
Hey, thank you so much, Chris, for giving me your time to be able to speak about the foods in Colombia. I'd like to know what are the most commonly consumed dark green leafy vegetables in Colombia?
The most common dark green leafy vegetables in Colombia are spinach, broccoli, chard, and kale.
Oh, nice. How do people consume these leafy vegetables?
It depends. Sometimes fresh, sometimes in an arepa, sometimes cooked. It depends.
Okay. Are there any of these vegetables that you would consider maybe they're more like a condiment?
Yeah, no, not in these 4, but there are some dark green leafy vegetables that are condiments that I have not mentioned.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Chris. So this is just a very quick example of how you can go about asking some questions. Anna shared earlier too some of the considerations. So the instructions are shared in the chat. The link to the DQQ map is also there, and we can. Julia, I believe, is going to send us into our groups, and we'll be also stopping by the sessions in case you all need any support. We have 10 minutes for this activity.
I see a question from Nilofer. Cecilia just posted the link in the chat. So just scroll up a GIF and you'll see the instructions. Feel free to use them.
So I hope you had a good time adapting the DQQ to your country. We would like you to go to dietquality.org where you can find the DQQs. If you go to the tools, you will be able to download the DQQ for your specific country. So take some time to do that and to check if what you found during the exercise matches the current DQQ. And we would also like to see if you had any thoughts to share about this exercise. So how was the experience for you? Were you able to get through the 2 groups? Feel free to either raise a hand or put your thoughts in the chat. Share things like, did you feel the process was good? Did you have any difficulty? What kinds of questions do you ask to understand better about the food list? Or if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat as well. So Jasmine says, it was quick for us. We had a good, thorough key informant. That's great. It's important to have yeah, a good key informant, someone who understands what the population consumes. Shailaja says we're using the DQQ in a study. Oh, and I would like to ask if there is a scope of including street food. So we'll have a time for question and answer also soon.
Maybe Shailaja can elaborate. When you said, is there scope for street food? Did you mean in these two categories of legumes and processed meats?
Hi, Anna. Thank you. We are using it presently in a group of teachers. We are doing a study on diet quality. And I think I wrote to you previously, you had shared the DQQ for India for me. I have used it in adolescent study and presently using it on adults. Because many people consume street foods, there the legumes and the preparations contain some amount of legumes. Like pav bhaji is a very common street food in India, where the gravy contains a lot of legumes. So, but we cannot fit it into a particular food group because it is consumed with a processed bread. So, pav bhaji is a distinct dish. So we were facing little confusion. Should we have a separate category of street foods which have local common street foods in the country, which I didn't see in the DQQ. We have Domino's and pizza and other things, but the street food is a major part of diet, and it contains high fat, trans fat, sugar, and salt. So I just wanted to know, maybe this is not directly relevant to the present discussion, but I just
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't have a street food category in the DQQ because it wouldn't be directly used in any of the indicators of diet quality. So one important thing about DQQ is that it does not capture everything that might have been consumed. It seeks to capture the food groups that are actually used in the indicators. And street food is such a diverse category, including so many different types of things, that it's not specific enough to indicate, high quality or low quality diet or any specific kinds of foods. So we don't include that category. The example you mentioned of pav bhaji is an interesting one in that if that is an important source of legume consumption, it would be something to think about including in the legume question. Because there's in India, as looking at the total population, there's lots and lots of different forms of legumes consumed that I don't think we included. Pav bhaji didn't rise to the level of like dal and khichdi and things that are like daily consumption for many people. So we didn't include it in the legume category, but it's a good thought of this is a way that people are consuming legumes. Should this be in the legume category? It's very, exactly aligned with this adaptation process. Thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you all. I think we can move on to our next activity, and there will be a time for question and answer at the end as well. I'll pass it on, I think, to Christina.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Cecilia. So now that we've had a chance to practice adapting the DQQ, we can take a look at how it works. How do we administer it? How do we use this tool? I'm just going to walk you through a couple key steps of implementing the DQQ, and then we'll actually have a chance to practice doing that in either the country that you adapted for or another country within your same groups. So I'm going to go through how to administer the diet quality questionnaire. This map, which all of you have already seen, is showing where the DQQ is available and where the food items for each country have been adapted. So they've been selected using an inclusive and rigorous and consistent process across all of the countries that you see highlighted in the different shades of blue. And they're ready to use. They're ready to use tools for accurate data collection in these countries. The DQQ is meant to be super simple. It's ready to use as is, designed to be read exactly as written, with no further work needed from your end to implement it, and no additional probing or dialogue while reading the questions. This is something that's very different from all the other ways that diet quality data have been gathered in the past. You know, where you might be used to probing and finding all the food items that people consume, and being careful not to forget any item and having a lot of training and expertise. But this tool is designed to be read by anyone. You do not have to be a nutritionist. You do not have to be an expert to use it. Basically, the only instruction for using the tool is simply to read it. Just reading the questionnaire exactly as it is how it was designed for you to use. The DQQ was adapted in, the 100+ countries we showed by a very labor-intensive process of key informant interviews. You have the majority of our adaptation team here with Chris Bagliano and Cecilia Gonzalez and myself. We gathered country input from experts all over the globe for this. And it's not meant to be further adapted or changed. When people suggest changes, we found that there is a chance they could be valid, but in our experience, there's a bigger chance that they either make the question too long or they add items that don't belong in the food group, or might be consumed in negligible amounts. We talked about condiments and herbs and garnishes. So therefore, they were intentionally excluded, which takes me to my next topic. What foods make the cut for the DQQ? So there's a reason you don't see every food item in a given country in the questions. This is intentional. Many are excluded because they're not necessary. A lot of them are excluded because they may be consumed in small amounts or may be confusing to people. We held extensive interviews at country level to find what everyone understands in the same way, even down to common terms. So we're very firm on not changing the questions. Doing this can effectively undo that process of weeding out important exclusions, which often risk overinflating indicators or even misleading the participants. And it's worth saying the tools will never be perfect. We might have missed some foods that are important in some food groups in some countries, but we're confident that what we have done is a very extensive process of interviews with local experts to determine the main Sentinel foods in each country, which on the whole is much more accurate than ad hoc adaptations done by different people, different methods that might yield inconsistent questions. The instructions are written on the bottom of the DQQ. You'll see this in every country's DQQ at the very bottom. And I'll just go through them quickly. So number 1, you read the question exactly as written. Do not include any additional dialogue or probing. And it gives you a link to the slides that you're seeing in front of you today. So these are publicly accessible. All these training slides are included on our website for download. Number 2, do not change the questions. Don't add or remove any foods. And this is because it's very likely that could invalidate the question, making it too long or including things that are not meant to be there. So we have license on these DQQs for public use, but it doesn't allow any modification. And last but not least, there's a lot of cases where you might want more information that's not in the DQQ. And if that's the case, you're of course free to do this. It's a survey tool. You can add other questions as needed. A lot of people are interested in other topics like food safety, or maybe where people got their food items. Did they grow them? Did they get them from the market? Or they might be interested in specific foods. An example Anna likes to mention is consumption of indigenous green vegetables. You might want to ask about a specific type of food that you or your program or your country is promoting. So you're free to do this, to add your own questions, but this information has to be added at the end. And what this does is it makes sure that the information collected with the DQQ is valid and comparable across settings and across time.
And if I could just add to this third instruction, for this audience where people may be interested in very specific or small areas, keep in mind the DQQ is a monitoring tool designed for large scale use, and it doesn't necessarily represent very small populations like maybe a pastoralist or indigenous population where diet patterns could be different. So that's a case for this number 3 instruction. If you're working in an area where there are specific foods that are consumed in that population, which is very different from the national consumption, then that's where you can add additional questions and additional foods. If there are foods consumed in the food groups that you're convinced are important in that specific population, then you can add them as additional questions. So we're, as Christina mentioned, we do not encourage people to change the questions because they've been so extensively validated and formulated for cognitive validity, but then adding your own questions about specific regional items is certainly feasible to do in this number 3 instruction.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Anna. Following on with the instructions, we also have the introduction, which some of you became familiar with earlier today during the activity. And the purpose of this is really to enable respondents to think about what they ate or drank yesterday. It's important that they can understand the questionnaire easily and really have the space to go through foods they might have consumed or drinks they might have had. We included some aspects, nudging people to think about their day, about where they were, who they were with. Details like this tend to make it a little easier for people to jog their memories. And it's not meant to be a dialogue here. It's really meant to give the participants some room to reflect to themselves about their day and what they might have consumed. And the introduction has some pauses in it, indicated with ellipses. The intention is to wait and pause during the ellipses to give people time to think. And that's really because our brains have difficulty doing more than one thing at once. We can't think and listen at the same time. So if the pauses aren't made, it's quite hard for the person to be fully engaged in listening while also reflecting about their day, which is a key part of the process. So these strategic pauses are really helpful. Think about what you ate in the morning. Think about what you may have had for lunch and who you were with. And then think about what you had for dinner yesterday. If we were to breeze through this introduction, it would be a struggle to think while we listen. So there actually is one piece of training beyond just reading the questionnaires, and it's to make sure we pause, which allows the introduction to serve its purpose and enables people to think back on their day. So this is the full introduction, which you've already heard, and it's at the top of every DQQ. And then there's also the STEM questions that you'll notice in the diet quality questionnaires. They appear throughout the survey, such as yesterday, did you eat any of the following vegetables? Followed by a few different vegetable questions. These are a really helpful nudge. They remind people throughout the survey to think about yesterday, not today, not last week, but yesterday. That's why this word keeps repeating in the questionnaire. It also helps them mentally with a cue. So, now I'm gonna think about vegetables versus fruits or another group. This can help a great deal with expectations. And next, it's key to read the entire question. So something we've encountered with the survey administration is enumerators choosing to pause after reading each food item. We wanna avoid that. To read the full question without pausing between foods. And why do we do that? Well, it's because we're not asking about individual foods. We're looking for a yes or no answer to the whole question. So for example, you would say, yesterday, did you have papaya, mango, or apricots? Not yesterday, did you have papaya? Did you have mango? Did you have apricots? Because we're really asking one question here, not 3. And then we also recommend not to cut the questions short, even if respondents are impatient and interrupting. By committing to the whole question, we avoid sending the message that participants can get through the entire survey faster just by saying yes at the beginning of each question. And then, of course, because the format is a series of close-ended Sentinel food questions, the answers are a simple yes or no, and they can be circled if you have a pen or paper, or ticked if you're using a tablet or other device. So just a quick zoom in, seeing the questions to be read out loud and then the responses to be indicated as you move through the questionnaire. And then what to do if somebody doesn't understand, if someone says, oh, what do you mean by that item? I don't know what ugu is. Maybe it's a region where that particular item isn't common. Our advice in this situation is not for the enumerator to try and explain the food item because then we lose consistency. We don't train all enumerators on what all of the items are, nor do we, train them to explain foods in the same consistent way. So we run the risk of having errors if enumerators elaborate, and if they might not have the right information or the full information. So in keeping with the instruction of just simply reading the question, you could read the whole question again and remind the respondent to say yes if they had any of the items in the list, encouraging them to reply to what they understand within a question. And then what we'll actually do now is try this for ourselves. So we will go and download the DQQ for your country of interest and practice administering with each other. I'll quickly share how this will go, and then I'll let you all get started. Okay, perfect. So same process here. You'll pick a country. You can do the same one that you did in your groups. You can choose to do a different one, maybe another group member's country for a change. And you will head to the DQQ. You will head to the dietquality.org website. I'll post everything in the chat as soon as I'm done. Don't worry, I'll have all the links ready for you. You'll pick a country and then you'll download that country's DQQ so that you can administer it within your group. When you do this, you will also download an Excel sheet. And you will use this Excel sheet to record your answers. So I'll put it into the chat for you all in a moment. Please download it as an Excel sheet from the Google Sheet link, and go ahead and open the file on your desktop. And in there, you'll see clear instructions to write 1 for yes and 0 for no for each of these questions. And last but not least, once you have both the DQQ of choice downloaded and the Excel to log your answers, you'll administer the DQQ. So you'll have about 10 minutes. You'll go through the questionnaire, however much of it that you can, and we'll let you get started. So just one moment, I'll put everything into the chat and then we can break out into the groups.
Great. So we're just going to quickly look at the results of everyone's administered DQQ, and I hope you were able to get through in this one practice session of how you read the DQQ in real life. And I wanted to just point you to this indicator guide that's available on the website. So there are a bunch of indicators that you can calculate from these different food groups, probably some that you might be interested in yourself that are maybe not even in this indicator guide, but this has some standard indicators, some of which we will go through right now. And I think, I'm not sure if you had these slides, Chris. Should I just give instructions on?
Yeah, please go ahead. Yep.
Great. So if you use your Excel where you entered the data, something like as shown here, if you go to the columns F and V and unhide them, then you will see, when you unhide them, you'll see the calculation of several different indicators that now Chris will do a brief Mentimeter to see what happened with these indicators.
So similar to the first Mentimeter, if you could log on to menti.com and enter the code, or just use your QR code from your phone, whatever's the most convenient for you. We will be entering the group scores and collectively reviewing the results for each of the diet quality indicators that Anna just mentioned. Great. And I think the Menti's in the chat as well. So if you didn't get that code or didn't have time to scan it, please feel free to click the Menti link that Christina sent in the chat just now. So, oh yeah, great. Okay, so the first poll is, did your group or the person that answered the question in your group achieve MDDW, or the minimum dietary diversity for women? So if you're able to enter your score based on the unhidden columns that Anna just mentioned, that would be great. Wait just a few minutes until everyone enters. So just as a reminder, the MDDW is designed for women for age 15 to 49. And if your food group diversity score is 5 or more, then you would have achieved the MDDW. So it seems that 10 of the group groups achieved MDW, which is great. Not so surprising with this group. We're talking to mostly nutrition-minded folks, so that's exciting. 2 said no, and 2 said don't know. All right, the next question is, did you have all 5 recommended food groups? So please again review your Excel file in the unhidden columns and respond accordingly. I knew that this was going to be, a health-minded group, but I'm shocked to see that how health-minded it is. This is great.
And just for info, I think all 5 includes at least 1 vegetable, at least 1 fruit, at least 1 pulse, nut or seed, at least 1 animal source food, and 1 starchy staple.
Excellent. So 12 yes and 1 no. That sounds great. Okay, the next one is the global dietary recommendations. And here we have the GDR healthy score and the GDR limit score. And thankfully, we don't have to do the calculation ourselves because the Excel sheet does that for us based on the responses of the DQQ. So the GDR healthy, you'll see column J, and the GDR limit is in column K. If you could please enter your responses now. Okay, great. Christina, are you able to hover over the scores so we can see the ratio? Okay, wow, very interesting. All right, I don't know, Anna, if you have any comments to add here.
No, it's great to see the range. We see quite a number of health promoting foods here. Score of 5 is generally better than average, having experience with looking at data in countries. And yeah, also a pretty low score on the foods to limit. So again, not too surprising with this group being quite health-minded.
All right, the next one is, how did you score on health protective factors? So the questions here are, did you have at least 1 fruit or vegetable? Did you have any whole grain foods? And did you have any legumes, nuts, and seeds? So, oh wow, okay, so everyone had at least 1 fruit or vegetable. That's excellent. Whole grains, okay. So about 8 people had whole grains and 4 did not. Great. And did you have any legumes, nuts, or seeds? 9 said yes, and 3 said no. So fruits and vegetables were the leading here, then followed by legumes, nuts, and seeds, and then whole grain foods. Okay, great. All right, the next question is, did you have at least 1 animal sourced food?
And I could jump in here and say one of the reasons for this indicator is simply that it matches with the infant and young child feeding indicator that's been newly published by WHO and UNICEF. So if looking across the population, you can use this information to compare, among adults versus among infants and young children. How are the populations scoring on this particular indicator to look at disparities and potential interventions on infant and young child feeding?
Wow, that's everyone had 15. Great. Thanks, Anna. All right, so the next category are soft drinks and savory ultra processed foods. So did you consume any soft drinks yesterday? Yes or no? And did you consume any packaged salty snacks, instant noodles, or fast food? Not so surprising on the soft drinks. 9 said no, 10 said no, 2 said yes, 8 said no on the packaged snacks and instant noodles, and 5 said yes. Yeah, this is definitely not the average, would not be the average answers for the general population. We're a bit of a biased group here.
Yeah, we're almost at time for the session. Okay. I think, organizing into groups always takes a little longer than we expect it to, but hopefully you had enough of a chance to get a taste of how the tool works and the indicators you can get from it. So maybe we'll pass to Gina. If you want, Gina, you could take a couple of questions or make closing remarks since we're almost at time.
No, thank you. First of all, thanks so much to all the participants. We hope that it was a really valuable session for you. There is just, I think, one really burning question that would be very helpful as we close if one of the team can answer. And that's the question about, if I want to administer this survey at subnational level, what do I do? And if I feel like I need to add any particular subnational foods, what should I do? And in the meantime, one of the team will answer that. But in the meantime, if you actually are planning on using the diet quality questionnaire in a program that you are trying to monitor changes in diet or for any purpose whatsoever, if you could please put that in the chat while we're closing, we would appreciate having that information. And also, please go to dietquality.org and familiarize yourself. There's lots of resources on there, and it's always being updated. So as Anna kind of gave you a teaser, there will be data up there toward the end of the year. And the diet quality questionnaires, new countries are being added occasionally. So it's a good site to just check in, particularly if you're using the DQQ. But let me just say thank you to everybody. I'll pass the floor to whomever wants to answer the question about use at sub-regional level. And then finally, we'll give the floor back to Julia. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Gina, and for bringing up that kind of burning question on subnational use. The answer, like for most questions, I would say is it depends. So think carefully about your purpose and your population. You know, the DQQ is a general tool for the general population. And as we saw in the China study, which we are also seeing in other countries, it does work quite well at subnational level in general. Like for an example, I'm from the US, I'm sitting in Massachusetts. I don't need to adapt the DQQ for Massachusetts because the general US questionnaire will serve very well for what people in my region eat. So in general, that's the answer, that it works pretty well. And again, we're not trying to get every single food that anyone might have consumed. It's a broad brush, big picture of diet patterns in the population. That said, if you are working in an area of the country where you know people are eating foods that are different from the general population, you might want to add questions at the end in that step number 3 of regional items that you believe are important in the area or the population you're working. So if you were working with indigenous populations, you probably would want to add other foods, or maybe even use an entirely different tool like an open recall. So it depends on what your purpose is. In general, we have taken regional differences into account in the adaptations. But you know, it depends on your specific situation as to whether to add more questions that you believe are really important. Thanks.
Thanks, Anna. And thanks again, everybody. And I will pass the floor back to Julia.
Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate you joining this session. We're going to wrap it up now, but thank you so much to everyone from the DQQ team, our facilitators, and thank you to all the participants for really engaging and interacting with this session, asking questions and participating. So please visit our website at ANH2022.org to learn about the other learning labs going on today and tomorrow, as well as the research conference next week. As we mentioned in the beginning of this session, the recording will be posted on the website in the coming weeks. So please do check that out if you want to revisit any parts of the session. And yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. So thank you again and have a good rest of your day.